showing you how I make my famous cinnamon buns today. Everybody always asks me for the recipe. All of my girlfriends have made this at home because I make the bomb buns. So let's get started. First things first, mise en place. That is the French term for get all your shit together out before you start the recipe. I have 1 cup of warm whole milk, and I'm going to add one of these instant yeast packets, which would be equivalent of about 2 1/4 teaspoons. So I'm just going to add this into my warm milk. It's important that you don't make your milk too hot or the yeast will die, and it's also important that your milk's not too cold or nothing will happen. So I am going to mix this with just a teeny bit of sucre. I love these. These are antique French dry goods jars that I ordered from an antique shop in Paris. So I am going to take about a half teaspoon and just throw it in here. The sugar will help the yeast to rise, and then I'm going to give it a light stir. Then I'm going to cover this with a kitchen towel and let this sit for 5 minutes until the yeast starts to get foamy. The secret to my special buns is this mashed potato that I add to the dough. It gives it that wonderful texture. So I'm gonna mash this so it's as smooth as possible. It's time to add the remaining wet ingredients to my mixture here. I have my 6 tablespoons of melted butter. I'm gonna add, and then I'm going to add my sugar. You always want to add your sugar to your wet ingredients. People always ask me, can I substitute almond milk? Can I substitute eggs? Do I have to use real butter? Find another recipe, because I love butter and I don't eat dairy and stuff all the time, but it just doesn't turn out the same. The reason why is because things like almond milk or cashew milk, as creamy as they are, they're full of a lot of additives and water. So it will separate and make your dough stringy. See how mad I'm getting? I can't even talk. And butter is just delicious and amazing, and it's really not that terrible for you. What's really bad for you is margarine and all of the hydrogenated oils that will melt and turn into a weird greasy dough if you decide to use that instead. So I added my 2/3 cup sugar, my 6 tablespoons melted butter into my milk mixture. Next up, I'm going to add my egg, but I'm going to do that with my hand mixer, and then I will add in my potato. I'm going to mix it up with my electric hand mixer. I would typically be using a KitchenAid, but when I moved across country, I donated it because it was too heavy. So if anybody wants to get me a KitchenAid, please. Just a light mix there to incorporate the egg. I did forget to mention earlier to add salt. I'm gonna add a half teaspoon of Himalayan salt. If it was kosher salt, I would add a full teaspoon because kosher salt is actually less salty than sea salt or Himalayan. All right, I'm gonna do this in 2 additions so I don't get all of the potato in there at once. Mix number 1. Cat just got on the counter. This is why always have a spray bottle if you have a cat. I'm gonna start adding my flour into my wet mixture, 1/2 cup by 1/2 cup. I have it pre-measured here, 3 1/2 cups all-purpose flour. I'm just gonna do it in little additions. Wish I still had my KitchenAid so this thing could just be rolling while I'm scooping. So we have about half of the flour mixture in, and it's already pretty thick. I'm just gonna scrape down the sides of my bowl and then continue to mix until I can't mix no more. Now I gotta get my hands sticky. If you're in a bad mood, I think the best thing to do is to follow a very specific baking recipe, because baking is more of like a science. Cooking, you can improvise, but if you fuck up, with the measurements on a baking recipe, it won't turn out. I'm just gonna form this into like a loose ball. Yep, a loose ball. But you never heard that term before. Okay. This is never gonna come out of my acrylic nails for like a week, but whatever. All in the name of good buns. Doesn't have to be perfect, but yeah, now I'm going to plop this back into the bowl, like so. Cover it with a towel and let it rise for 2 to 3 hours. Time for the big reveal. Woo! Look at that big fat dough baby. It's definitely doubled in size. I let it go for the full 3 hours because I live in a colder climate and my house is a little chillier than maybe somebody who lives in Miami. So it could take 1 hour to double in size if you live in a more humid environment or if it is a different season. But because it is winter and I am in Minnesota, full 3 hours for this big baby. Now we're gonna roll this thing out to about a 1/2 inch thick. Rolled out my dough, so it's about a 1/2 inch thick on the side into a nice, neat rectangle oval. At the nail salon, I think they call this shape the squoval. All right, now I have 1 stick of melted butter and I'm gonna mix it with 1 cup, oop, it's not in there. 1 cup of brown sugar. Time to spread my brown sugar butter mixture. Make sure to get it all over even to the edge. I'm gonna take my cinnamon and do a light sprinkling, just like a little angelic cinnamon dust. Now I've rolled it into a fat log and then I'm gonna cut these into little 2 finger sized rolls. My cinnamon rolls are cut and they are in their baking dish. I'm gonna let them sit in here for another hour before I bake them so they get a little higher and raise just a teeny bit more. I have let this sit out so it is at room temperature. And right here I have 6 ounces of cream cheese. You could do 6 to 8, just really kind of depends on how much glaze you want. So I'm gonna drop this into my mixing bowl. The mixing bowl is cold and my cream cheese is room temperature. Cold so that way it thickens when I add the heavy cream. So I'm going to beat this until it's soft and then I'm gonna add in 5 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream. Okay, cream cheese is whipped and I'm adding my powdered sugar. I will be adding a total of, well, about a 1/2 cup. Ooh, okay. 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract to this glaze mixture. And I'm gonna put it in the fridge so it can chill. And then I'm popping my buns in the oven. They will bake for 35 to 40 minutes. Just took these babies out of the oven. When you insert a toothpick, it comes out clean. I'm about to throw on the cream cheese glaze that I made earlier. These are not scalding hot, but the buns are still warm, which will allow the cream cheese to spread a little easier. And there's nothing like a warm cinnamon bun. All done. Creamy and chewy. And that's all, folks. Now it's time to make a mess and oh my God.